Welcome to Architrave Gaming. I'm the Archmaster. This is a continuation of a look into my own personal game system, Arches and Avatars. I've wrote it myself. The Lord is very generous. So last time we talked about our attributes and how I changed one of them. I changed wisdom to willpower and got rid of perception and stuff like that because, in my opinion, it's not really needed at all. It only hurts the game. And then with I talked about how aspects actually fix several problems in D&D, like, you know, the endless rolling of dice, where, you know, like, you dog on a check again and again and again until you finally win. It's like there was no risk there. There was nothing. With aspects, there's actually risk. And also talked about how, you know, we realistically simulate characters getting tired in a very non-obtrusive and non-tedious way. You're just marking off a thing. You know, it's very simple. Now we are getting to another one of my favorite things, which is well, it's attribute threshold bonuses, but it's how I take things in 5e and I rearrange them. So in 5e, this is an example of how I do this. In 5e, you have your extra attack for a martial at level 5, right? You can attack twice. Everyone can attack twice at level 5. When I was first designing the bones of my system, I knew I wanted a d20 and 6 attributes, and, you know, you roll over the DC and you win, right? I wanted the basics, right? But pretty much everything else I questioned. So with the whole idea of you know, your extra attack, it makes sense that you do more damage and get better as you level up. That makes sense. But a whole extra attack at level 5 every single time, I was like, what would make more sense than that, right? Because in A&A, in D&D, it's pretty gamified. In A&A, though, I try to merge a little bit of the simulation in there. I try to you know, marry the game and the simulation a little closer. So I want the game mechanics to actually make sense and not contrast basics of real life. So I was like, what actually makes you attack more times? Is it just experience? Is it just level? The person who has killed a dragon, he can now attack a second time in the same 6 seconds. Does that actually make sense? I was like, no. What on the character sheet actually makes you attack a second time? I was thinking, dexterity. The more dexterous you are, the faster you are. Dexterity, speed, agility, that's all kind of the same wheelhouse. It's about the quickness of your movements, quick and precise. So I was thinking, well, why don't we just tie it to your dexterity score? If you have a 15 dexterity score or higher, you can now attack twice. And that started opening up a whole bunch of possibilities. I'm like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. If we can do this, if we can tie various abilities that you normally get, you know, from class features and whatnot, if we can tie them to your attributes, that means we can open up a lot of customization. So I was thinking about the fighter and how the fighter in D&D is bloody boring, right? And I was thinking that you have your extra attack and your action surge. And I was thinking, so many people try to multiclass into fighter, even though it doesn't actually make sense for the character to do so. They feel pigeonholed, like they have to multiclass into fighter in order to get that extra attack. And I was like, what if we tie that to willpower? What if you have what if your willpower score, right? You could actually spend the aspect that's next to your willpower score, so grit in this case, you can actually spend grit to take an extra attack. And if you have, like, you know, a 1 to 10 grit, or it's technically a 1 to 14 grit, willpower. If your willpower score is anything from 1 to 14, then you spend 3 grit, and you can take an extra attack. Doesn't matter your class, doesn't matter where you are, who you are, you get not an extra attack, a whole extra action of your choice, actually. I'm just not precise today. I think I've been recording a lot of videos and my brain is fried. Anyway, I'll try to finish this. So you get to spend your grit to take an extra attack. If you have a 15 or higher willpower score, then it only takes 2 grit. And if you have a 20 willpower score maximum, then you can only you only have to spend 1 grit to take a whole extra action. And I was like, this opens it up. A lot of people like to just push through and spend that extra action when they really need it. And I like those moments in the game. I like it when you can decide, like, hey, I want to spend this willpower. I need an extra action right now. I think that's actually really cool. And so with Constitution, you have the aspect of stamina, right? I'm thinking, what happens when you exert, you spend stamina, right? You spend stamina when you make a Constitution check or save, but that doesn't happen a lot. I was like, there has to be another use for stamina. And I was thinking, well, it can just add a numerical +1 to checks. You know, specifically physical checks like, you know, a con check, agility, or effort. You can con check, dexterity check, or strength check. I have it reversed on my page, and I'm getting confused about it. But yeah, you can take your stamina and be like, all right, GM, I want to roll this, and I want to add 3 stamina. So I'm just adding plus 3 to this roll on top, right? And so it's symbolizing you putting in that, you know, extra work, extra effort into it. And so yeah, those are the threshold bonuses for con and willpower and dex. With strength, when you get a 15 strength score, then you can wield two-handed weapons without disadvantage. I know in 5e you only have to have a 13 strength score to wield two-handed weapons. I make it up to 15 because I want, like, my two-handed weapons are kind of cool, and I want you to have to actually decide, like, I'm going to put in effort to get a high strength instead of, like, oh yeah, I had a 13, leftover 13, yeah, I'll put it in strength. I want it to be like, I actually decided to have a 15 strength. I actually decided to wield two-handed weapons, right? It's a little bit more of an investment. Not too much, 13 to 15. It's not too much, but it's enough that I think it matters. Plus, all of the threshold bonuses here are 10 and 15 and 20, so I didn't want to mess that pattern up and make that one 13 just because 5e did it. So yeah, with a 15, you can wield your two-handed weapons normally. You can also wield a non-light weapon in your offhand. You know, in 5e, you can wield a normal weapon here and a light weapon here. If you have a 15 strength, they can both be normal weapons. 2 long swords if you want, 2 axes, right? And then if you have a 20 strength score, you can wield a two-handed weapon in one hand. So, yeah, so that means you can wield 2 one-handed weapons. Two two-handed weapons, like 2 battle axes. So I instead of being like, oh, you're this class, you're this, you know, subclass, this feature, I wanted it to actually be a choice you made where it's like, I put my strength score up, watch me wield 2 battle axes, right? I think it also makes more sense. Instead of saying, oh, you're a fighter, you can wield two-handed weapons now. It's like, huh? You know, but saying, oh, your strength is higher, you can wield two-handed weapons now. That clicks. The player's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? A lot of my changes are just about making the game make more sense. I want you to actually be able to intuitively understand what's going on. With dex, when you have a 15 dex, you can actually you can attack twice with your one weapon, with your one-handed weapon. When you have a 20 dex, you can actually attack twice with both weapons, right? You get your 4 attacks if you have a 20 dex. And then you can combine that with strength if you have a high enough strength, and if you have like a 15 strength, you have 2 medium weapons, like 2 d8 longswords, and you get 4 attacks. Like, there you go. You put all your eggs into strength and dex, and now that's your playstyle. I don't want to pigeonhole you into a class. I want to say these are your attributes. You get to decide how you work. You could say, oh yeah, I'm putting all my stats in Constitution, so I add all these +1s everywhere I want, right? When you reach 15 Constitution, every point of stamina adds a +2. And when you reach 20 Constitution, every point of stamina adds a +3 to whatever roll, right? So you can add 3 points of stamina and add +9 to your roll if you have a 20 con, right? And so you can. Okay, well, I'll finish this before I talk about the next thing. So with Charisma, when you reach a 15 Charisma score, your allies gain advantage on melee attacks against a creature you are in melee with, which is essentially flanking. You don't get the flanking bonus, they do, but it makes sense with Charisma because you have that level of attention grabbing. Charisma is about essentially your ability to gain attention and focus on yourself, right? That's why the aspect is presence. It's like how much of a presence do you have in the room, right? So when you have that high Charisma, you can actually, keep the focus and attention of an enemy, and so your allies get advantage. No, flanking isn't a flat base bonus thing where everyone flanks. You can watch a video by XP to level 3, and he talks about how he doesn't like flanking, and I totally agree with him, so I took out flanking, except if you have a 15 Charisma score, then your allies can flank, because, you're grabbing their attention. I think that makes sense. And you may see where I'm going with this. Lastly, intelligence. With a 15, you crit on a 19 or 20, and at 20 intelligence, you essentially gain the Keen Mind feat, right? You have to have a 20 intelligence to get that. The feat just comes automatically, right? So here's where all this is leading. This works for a lot of classes, not just a martial fighter, but with my fighter class, it's not called that, but I'll use it because it's the one you're familiar with. With the fighter class, I thought this applies to all of the classes, by the way, but I'm using the example of the fighter. I didn't like the fact that you have all these specific attributes that you have to have for certain classes. I thought it's limited. I especially in my system, because I don't let you, when you roll your stats, I don't let you put them wherever you want. You roll in order, and then you can take 2 and flip any 2 you want. If you play a human, you can take 3 and rearrange them however you want, but that's it. All the rest are just how you roll, right? There's a certain amount of creating a character that's discovering your character and not just min-maxing, I want my stuff wherever I want. I think taking 2 or 3 and switching them is a really good middle ground. It's between old school and new school, which is essentially what my book is. It's a little bit OSR in there, a little bit harder, a little bit lower health and stats and whatnot. But I think that blend of OSR and new school 5e, I think makes this game shine. I enjoy it. My players enjoy it. Anyway, limiting. I didn't want to say, you rolled your stats wrong. You rolled your stats bad. Sorry, you can't play your fighter. Or any class. But we're using fighter as an example again. So I didn't like that. I wanted to give you an ability to use to have any score high or any score low and still be able to play the class you wanted. So here's how. If you play a fighter and you have a really high con but a low strength, yeah, your attack roll isn't going to be great and your damage isn't going to be great. But if you pump all your points into con, you have a +3 to all of your attacks. So that makes up, right? Because you're spending stamina every time and you get that +3 every time, right? There you go. It makes up for it. If you have like a low strength, as fighter needs strength, right? If you have a low strength but you have a high willpower, great. Now you can just take extra attacks. Yeah, you only have a +3 instead of a +6 like most characters. We'll just attack again. That kind of makes up for it, doesn't it? Right? If you have a low strength but a high dex, it's like, yeah, you don't do a lot of damage, you don't have a great attack roll, but you get to just attack twice with your dex, because you have a high dex. Of course, you can have a high strength, and that works. You can use 2-handed weapons. You can, use 2 different 1-handed weapons, etc. Your Constitution score also determines how much armor you can wear. So if you have a high con score, yeah, you may not be great with your weapons, but you'll survive long enough to do enough damage, right? With your charisma, you gave your allies advantage, so it's not so much about you. I don't have a great strength, I'm a fighter. Well, I have a high charisma, so my allies get advantage. And then with intelligence, it's like, I don't do much damage, but I crit more often. So it's like the different scores actually help you do whatever you're doing. And yes, I did specifically gear this toward martial characters first because I think martials need a lot of love. But still, all of this applies to every class, right? If you're a mage and you have a 19 dex, you still crit on 19 to 20 because you have, not 19 dex, 15 intelligence, etc. So yeah, they apply to everyone, but it allows you to actually play a class with any high attribute without it bogging you down, right? It's a different play style, right? But here's something. I'm not picking on Dungeon Coach at all. I've watched the guy for years. I watch every single one of his live streams. I love the guy and I love his. I like his system. I've been inspired by his system, as some of you can probably tell. But here's one thing I don't like about how he did his version of the what's it called? The prime attribute, right? He did something similar. Where he's like, hey, whatever your highest attribute is, that's the one that you use for your class. So if you want to be an intelligence fighter or a dex fighter or a strength fighter, it all works. You use your highest score, and that's what you use for your attack rolls. He saw the same problem I did, and he fixed it. But I personally prefer my way because, again, it's not so much gamified. There's a little more simulation. I actually say, hey, it makes sense why you are just as effective. It's not because, you just add the number. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the simulation. It's a little immersion breaking, right? But when I say, hey, you have a high strength, so you do more damage and hit harder, your attack roll's higher, makes sense. You have a high dex, you attack more times. That's how you keep up with the other fighters. You have high willpower. You get to take whole extra actions, which can be attacks, movement, etc. That's how you keep up with the other fighter. You have a high, charisma or intelligence. Yeah, you find more crits, or your allies are benefited. I think by just saying, you just add whichever number is higher, you kind of flatten them all and make them all the same. But by having an actually different benefit per attribute that's high, you actually changed up the play style. It feels better. It makes more sense. And I personally prefer the customization of like, I have a 20 strength, I'm going to use my 2, war hammers, and I'm going to go at him. Or I'm going to, I have a really high con, I'm going to wear the best armor. Or like the high dex, and I attack more times just because dex, right? And you can combine these. Most characters are probably going to have 2 scores at least decently high, right? So you can have a high willpower and a high dex. And so, if you attack 4 times with your action, and then you take an extra action with your willpower to attack 4 more times, that's a super cool combination, right? You can do that by picking 2 high, right? Of course, as you level up, you use ASIs and whatnot, you'll actually get 2 of them high. You probably won't have 2 high at the start. But still, I think this way, I don't want to say better, but I like this way a lot because it actually feels different. The play I bit my tongue again. The play style is different, and it just makes sense, right? I really like that. The video is long enough. Thank you for watching. I have a Patreon. Thank you to my one patron, Jack McCarthy. Yeah, YouTube pleasantries are great, and God bless.